Hi everyone, we are in chapter 18 of Where the Red Fern Grows. We only have 3 more chapters left to find out how this beautiful chapter book ends, okay? Recap, like we always do, chapter 17, there became a big blizzard storm with sleet. They're still in the woods hunting. They lost their dogs. Billy didn't want to give up. He convinced his dad, Grandpa, and Judge to help him find it along the way. Grandpa got injured with a sprained ankle. They thought he might have passed away, but thank goodness he only was unconscious. So Grandpa is good. He found his 2 dogs. They were fine. And the story left off with they are sitting near the campfire, and Billy has warmed up these coon skins that he had skinned, and he's putting them over Grandpa's foot while his 2 dogs went off to catch that 3rd coon that escaped. He is trying to wait until the storm dies off or until daybreak comes so he can go and retrieve his 2 dogs, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and jump into chapter 18 of Where the Red Fern Grows. Just before dawn, the storm blew itself out in the last angry roar. It started snowing. A frozen silence settled over the cranebrake. Back in the thick timber of the river bottoms, the sharp snapping of limbs could be heard. The tall stalk of wind canes looked exhausted from the hellish night. They were dropping and bending from the weight of the frozen sheets. I climbed out to the deep gully and listened for my dogs. I couldn't hear them. Just as I started back down the bank, I heard something. I listened. Again, I heard the sound. Papa was watching me. "Can you hear the dogs?" he asked. "No, not the dogs," I said, "but I could hear something else." "What does it sound like?" he asked. "Like someone whooping," I said. Papa and the judge hurried up to the bank. They heard the sound again. It was coming from a different direction. The first time I heard it, I said, "It was over that way." "It's the men from the camp," the judge said. "They're searching for us." We started whooping. The searchers answered. Their voices came from all directions. The first one to reach us was Mr. Kyle. He looked haggard and tired. He asked if everything was all right. Yes, we're all right," Papa said, "but the old man had a bad ankle. It looks like we will have to carry him out. Your team broke loose and came back to campground about midnight." Mr. Kyle said, "They look spooked. This really spooked us. We were sure something bad happened. 25 of us began searching since. Several men climbed down the bank and went over to Grandpa. They looked at his ankle. One said, 'I don't think it's broken, but it sure is a bad sprain.' 'You're in luck,' another one said. 'We have some of the best doctors in the state of Texas in our camp.' Dr. Charlie Latman. Shout out to Texas. We'll have him fixed up in no time." "Yes," another said, "and if I know Charlie, he's probably got a small hospital with him." Back in the crowd, I heard another man say, "You mean the Latman fella who owes those black and tan hounds is a doctor?" "Sure is," another said, "one of the best." Mr. Kyle asked where my dogs were. I told him that they were treed somewhere. "What do you mean treed somewhere?" he said. Papa explained what had happened. With wide-eyed look on his face, he said, "Do you mean to tell me those hounds stayed with the tree in that blizzard?" I nodded. Looking at me, he said, "Son, I hope they have that coon tree because you need this one to win the cup. The 2 Walker hounds caught 3 before storm came in. When it got bad, all the hunters came in." The judge spoke up. "I always believed these hounds knew that boy needed another coon to win," he said. If you fellas had seen some of the things these dogs have done, you'd believe it too." One hunter walked over to the broken snag. "3 out of this tree," he said. "No wonder, look here. This old snag was half full of leaves and grass. Why, it was a regular old din tree." Several of them walked over. I heard one say, "I've seen this happen before. Remember that big red in the river coon bottom, in the Red River bottoms, when the little beagle hound treed 4 coons in an old hollow snag? That won the championship too." I wasn't there, but I remember reading about it, one said. Say, I don't know, Benson, Mr. Kyle said. The men started looking at each other. When he was searching farther downriver than the rest of us, one fellow said. Maybe he didn't hear us shouting. Some of the men climbed out the gully. They started whooping. From the distance, I heard another answering shout. He hears us, someone said. He's coming. Everyone looked relieved. Mr. Benson stuck the washout a little way above us. He was breathing hard, as if he were running. He started walking as soon as he was within hearing distance. It scared me when I first heard them, he said. I didn't know what they were. They looked like white ghosts. I've never seen anything like it. A hunter grabbed Mr. Benson by the shoulder, shaking. Get a hold of yourself, man, he said. What are you talking about? Mr. Benson took a deep breath to control himself and started again in much calmer voice. Those two hounds, he said, I found him. They're frozen solid. There's nothing but white ice from the tip of their nose to the ends of their tail. Hearing Mr. Benson's word, I screamed and ran to my father. Everything started swirling around me and around. I felt lighter as a feather. My knees buckled. I knew no more. Ooh, I have chills just reading that little paragraph. Regaining consciousness, I opened my eyes and I opened my eyes and could dimly see the blurry image of the men around me. A hand was shaking me. I could hear my father's voice, but I couldn't understand his words. Little by little, the blackness faded away. My throat was dry and I was terribly thirsty. I asked for some water. Mr. Benson came over. He said, son, I'm sorry, truly sorry. I didn't mean it that way. Your dogs are alive. I guess I was excited. I'm very sorry. I heard a deep voice say, that's a hell of a thing to do. Come running in here saying your dogs are frozen solid? Mr. Benson said, I didn't mean it to sound that way. I am sorry. What more do you want me to do? The deep voice growled again. I still think it was of a thing for a man to do. Mr. Kyle took over. Now let's not have any more of this, he said. We have to work. We've been standing here acting like a bunch of school kids. All this time, the old man has been lying there suffering. A couple of you men cut 2 poles and make a stretcher to carry him. While the men were getting the poles, Papa heated a coonskin again and rewrapped Grandpa's foot. With belts and long leather laces from their boots, the hunters made a stretcher. Very gently, they put Grandpa on it. Again, Mr. Kyle took command. Part of us will start for the camp with him, he said. The others will go after the dogs. Here, take his gun, Papa said. I'll go with him. Looking at me, Mr. Kyle said, come on, son. I want to see your hounds. Mr. Benson led the way. As soon as we get out of this cane, he said, we may be able to hear them. They may have cooned the tree in the big black gum tree. You're going to see a sight. Now I mean a sight. They walked a ring around the tree, clear down through the ice and snow. You can see the bare ground. Wonder why they did that, someone asked. I don't know, Mr. Benson replied, unless they ran in the circle to keep from freezing to death or to keep the coon in the tree. I figured I knew why my dogs were covered with ice. The coon had probably crossed the river maybe several times. Old Dan and Little Ann would have followed him. They had come out of the river with their blazing coats dripping wet, and freezing blasts in this blizzard had done the rest. Nearing the tree, we stopped and stared. Did you ever see anything like that, Mr. Benson asked. When I first saw them, I thought they were white wolves. My dogs hadn't seen us when we came up. They were trotted round and round, just as Mr. Benson had said. We could see the path that they had worn down through the ice and the snow, till the bare black earth was visible. Light, ghostly white shadows around and around they trotted. In a low voice, someone said, they know that if they stop, they'll freeze to death. It's unbelievable, said Mr. Kyle. Come on, we must do something quickly. With a choking sob, I ran for my dogs. On hearing our approach, they sat down and started bawling treat. I noticed their voices didn't have a solid ring. Their ice-covered tails had rattled sound and was switching this way and that way on icy ground. A large fire was built. Standing my dogs close to the warm heat and the gentle hands of the hunters went to work. They handkerchiefed and scarred, heated, steaming hot. Little by little, the ice thawed from their bodies. If they had ever laid down, someone said, they would have froze to death. I never knew, another said. They knew it, another said. That's why they kept running in that circle. What I can't understand is why they stayed in that tree, Mr. Benson said. I've seen hounds stay with the tree for a while, but not in the northern blizzard. Men, Mr. Kyle, said Mr. Kyle. People have been trying to understand dogs ever since the beginning of time. No one ever knows what they'll do. You can read every day where a dog saved the life of a drowning child or laid down his life for his master. Some people call this loyalty. I don't. I may be wrong, but I call it love, the deepest kind of love. Oh, I got chills for that line too. After these words were spoken, a thoughtful silence settled over the men. The mood was broken by a deep growling voice. I had heard back in the washout. It's a shame that people all over the world can't have the kind of love in their hearts, he said. There would be no wars, slaughter, or murder, no greed or selfishness. It would be the kind of world that God wants us to have, a wonderful world. All of the ice was thawed from my dogs and their coats were dried out. I could see that they were all right. I was happy again and felt good all over. One of the hunters said, "Do you think those hounds are thawed enough to fight a coon?" "Sure, just run him out of the tree," I said. At the crack of the gun, the coon ran far out of the big limb and stopped. Again, the hunter sprinkled him with birdshot. This time he jumped, hitting the ground and crouched down. Old Dan made a lunge. Just as he reached him, the coon sprang up and came down on his head, holding on with his claws. The coon sank his teeth in a long, tender ear. Old Dan was furious. He started turning in circles, bawling with pain. Little Ann was trying hard to get a hold of the coon, but she couldn't. Because he was circling fast, Old Dan's feet flew out from under him and he fell. This gave Little Ann a chance. Darting in, her jaws closed down on the back of the coon's neck. I knew the fight was over. Arriving at the camp, I saw that all of the tents had been taken down, but ours. A hunter said. Everyone was in a hurry to get out before another blizzard set in. Papa told me to take my dogs into the tent as Grandpa wanted to see them. I saw tears in my grandfather's eyes as he talked to them. His ankle was wrapped in bandages. His foot and toes were swollen to twice their normal sizes. They had turned a grayish yellow color. Placing my hand on his foot, I could see he felt the feverish heat. Dr. Lampman came over. "Are you ready to go now?" "Are you ready to go now?" he asked, snorting and growling. Grandpa said, "I told you, I wasn't going anywhere until I see the gold cup handed to this boy." Turning to face the crowd, Dr. Lampman said, "Men, let's get this over. I wanted to get this man to town. That's one of the meanest sprains I've ever seen, and it should be in a cast. But I don't have any plaster or Paris with me." The hunter who came by our tent, collected the jackpot money, came up to me. Handing me the box, he said, "Here you are, son. There's over $300 in that box, and it's all yours." Turning to the crowd, he said, "Fellas, I can always say this. On this hunt, I've seen two of the finest little coon hounds I've hoped to see." There was a roar of approval from the crowd. Looking down, I saw the box that was almost filled with money. I was shaking all over. I tried to say thanks, but it was all a whisper. Turning, I handed the box to my father, and the rough old hands closed around it. I saw a strange look came over his face. He turned and looked at my dogs. Some of the men started shouting, "Here he is! Here it is!" The crowd parted and the judge walked through. I saw the gleaming metal of the gold cup in his hand. After a short speech, he handed it to me and saying, "Son, this makes me very proud. It's a great honor to present you with the championship cup." The crowd exploded. The hunters shouted were deafening. I don't know from where the two silly old tears came. They just squeezed out their way out. I felt them as they rolled down my cheeks. One dropped on the smooth surface of the cup and splattered. I wiped it away with my sleeve. Turning to my dogs, I knelt down and showed the cup to them. Little Ann licked it, and old Dan sniffed one time and then turned away his head. The judge said, "Son, there's a place on that cup to engrave the names of your dogs. I can take it into Oklahoma City and have it done, or if you want to have it done yourself, the engraving charge has already been paid by the association." Looking at the cup, it seemed that far down in the gleaming shadows, I could see two wide blue-eyed glue to the window pail. I knew that my little sisters was watching the road and waiting for our team. Looking back at the judge, I said, "If you don't mind, I'll take it with me. My grandfather can send it in for me." Laughing, he said, "All right, that's all right." Handing me a slip of paper, he said, "This is the address where you should send it." Grandpa said, now that's settled, I'm ready to go to town." Turning to Papa, he said, "You'll have to bring the buggy. I wish you'd look after my stock. I know Grandma will want to go in with us, and there'll be no one there to feed them. Tell Billy Lowry to come up and take care of the store. You'll find the keys in the usual place." "We'll take care of everything," Papa said. "Don't worry about a thing. I don't intend to stop until we get back, because it looks like we're in for some bad weather." I went over and kissed Grandpa goodbye. He pinched my cheek and whispered, "We'll teach these city slickers that they can't come up here and beat our dogs." I smiled. Grandpa was carried out and made comfortable in the back seat of Dr. Lankman's car. I stood and watched as it wheezed and bounced its way out of the sight. While I'm harnessing the team," Papa said, "you take the tent down and pack our gear. On the back seat of the buggy, I made a bed out of bedclothes. Down on the floorboards, I fixed a nice place for your dogs." All through the night, the creaking wheels of our buggy moved on. Several times I woke up. My father had wrapped a tarp around himself. Reaching down, I could feel my dogs. They were warm and comfortable. Early the next morning, we stopped for breakfast while Papa tended to the team. I turned my dogs loose to let them stretch. "We made good time last night," Papa said. "If everything goes right, we'll be home long before dark." Reaching Grandpa's store in the middle of the afternoon, Papa said, "I'll put the team in the barn and feed the stock while you unload the buggy." Coming back from the barn, he said, "In the morning, I'll go over and tell Billy Lowry to come up and open the store." Looking around, he said, "It snowed here. It snowed more here than it did where we were hunting." Feeling big and important, I said, "I don't like the look of the weather. We'd better be scooting for home." Papa laughed. "You sure you're not in a hurry to get home to show you're off your gold cup?" he asked. A smile was my only answer. 200 yards this side of our home, the road made a turn around a low foothill, shutting our house out of view. Papa said, you're going to see a scramble as soon as we get around the bend." It was more of a stampede than a scramble. The little one came out first, all but tore the screen door from its hinge. The other girls passed her just beyond the gate. In a hurry, she slipped and fell face down in the snow. She started crying. The other girls ran up asking for the cup. Holding it high over my head, I said, "Now wait a minute. I've got another one for you." I held the small silver cup out to them. While they were fighting over it, I ran to the little one. Picking her up, I brushed the snow from her long braided hair and tear-stained face. I told her that there was no use to cry. I had brought the gold cup to her, and no one else was going to get it. Reaching for the cup, I wrapped her small arms around it, squeezing it up tight. She ran for the house to show Mama. Mama came out of the porch. She was just as excited as the girls were. She held her arms out, and I ran to her. She hugged and kissed me. "It's good to have you home," she said. "Look what I have, Mama," the little one cried. "It's all mine." She held the golden cup out in her two small hands. As Mama took the beautiful cup, she looked at me. She started to say something, but was interrupted by the cries of the other girls. We have one too, Mama," they cried, and it was just as pretty as that one. It's not either the little piece. It's not either the little one piped in the definite voice. "It's not even as big as mine. 2 cups, Mama explained. Did you win 2? "Yes, Mama," I said. Little Ann won that one all by herself. The awe expression on my mother's face was wonderful to see. Holding the cup in each hand, she held them out in front of her. 2, she said. a gold cup and a silver one. Who would have thought anything so wonderful could have happened to us? I'm so proud, so very proud. Handing the cup back to the girl, she walked over to Papa. After kissing him, she said, I just can't believe everything that just happened. I'm so glad you went along. Did you enjoy yourself? With a smile on his face, Papa almost shouted, everyone enjoy myself? Why, I never had such a time in my life. His voice trailed off in a low calm. That is, except for one thing. Grandpa had a bad accident. Yes, I know, Mama said. One of Tom Logan's boys was at the store when they arrived. He came by and told us all about it. The doctor said it wasn't as bad as it looked, and he was pretty sure Grandpa would be home in a few days. I was happy to hear this news and could tell by the pleased look on my father's face he was glad to hear it too. On entering the house, Papa said, oh, I almost forgot. He handed the box of money to Mama. What's this? She asked. Oh, it's just a little gift from old Dan and little Ann, Papa said. Mama opened the box. I saw the color drain from her face. Her hands started trembling. Turning back to us, she walked over and sat on the mantle. A peaceful silence settled over the room. I could hear the clock ticking away, the fire of the fireplace crackling and popped. Turning from the mantle, Mama looked straight at us. Her lips were tightly pressed together to keep them from quivering. Walking slowly to Papa, she buried her face in his chest. I heard her say, thank God my prayers have been answered. There was a celebration in our home that night. To me, it was like a second Christmas. Mama opened the jar of huckleberries and made a large cobbler. Papa went to the smokehouse and came back with a huckleberry cured ham. We sat down to a feast of ham, huge plates of fried potatoes, ham gravy, hot cornbread, fresh butter, and wild bee honey. During the course of our meal, the entire story of the championship hunt was told, some by Papa and some mostly by me. Just when everything was so perfect and peaceful, an argument sprang up between the two eldest girls. It seemed that each wanted to claim the silver cup. Just when they were on the verge of swaying it in two, so each of them could alter share, Papa settled the squabble by giving the oldest one the silver dollar. Once again, peace and harmony was restored. That night, at the preparing for bed, a light flashed by my window. Puzzled, I tiptoed over to peek through the pane. It was Mama, carrying my lantern and 2 large plates helped high with food. She was headed for the doghouse. Setting the light down on the ground in front of it, she called my dogs. While they were eating, Mama did something I couldn't understand. She knelt down on her knees in prayer. After they had eaten their food, Mama started petting them. I could hear her voice but couldn't make out her words. Whatever it was she was saying must have pleased them. Little Ann wiggled and twisted. Even old Dan wagged his long red tail, which was very unusual. Papa came out. I saw him put his arm around Mama. Side by side, they stood for several minutes looking at my dogs. When they turned to enter the house, I saw Mama dab her eyes with her apron. Laying in bed, staring into the darkness, I tried to figure out the strange actions of my parents. Why had Mama knelt in prayer in front of my dogs? Why she had wept? It was running all the way around my mind when I heard them talking. I know, Papa said, but I think there's a way. I'm going to have to talk to Grandpa. I don't think that old foot of his is ever going to be the same again. He's going to need some help around the store. I knew what they were talking about, but I couldn't understand what they meant. Then I thought, why this is. They want me to help Grandpa. That would be all right with me. I could still hunt every night. Feeling smart for figuring out the conversation, I turned and fell asleep. And that is the end of chapter 18. Tomorrow we'll go into chapter 19 to see how two chapters shy of the end, how this story ends. I hope again you're enjoying the chapter. You are not answering any questions. This is strictly finding out how the red fern grows ends. We don't want to abandon our book because we started a new read aloud, so I'm still going to finish this one off, but you're only watching it for pleasure to see how it ends. No questions are needed to be answered. All right, so I'll see y'all tomorrow for chapter 19.